from the heart to the brain, then the brain to the heart. So the heart's actually wiser, not to say we don't need the brain, but the heart picks it up first rather than just launching into Y as Q and all the benefits. Like, exactly why not SQ? Like, what the heck, you know? I think there's going to be, the answer will differ according to national culture, family culture, when I say this, but as an American, I can say this. I noticed because of the culture in many of the companies that a lot of people held themselves back from saying their truth,
Mm.
right? Because there's such a fear about getting fired.
All right, well, welcome, Team ET. Great to have you here again. But I want to start today by doing something a little bit different, and that is I want to challenge all of you. Now, note that this challenge, whilst it's unknown for you, I also haven't spoken about it with our guest, Miss Colleen Slaughter. So we're going to be building our conversation today very much off the cuff. And yet I'm, for some reason, feeling quietly confident that Colleen is deeply aware of our topic and we're going to have a lot of fun with it. So here's what I'm proposing. I'm asking you to challenge yourself, maybe park your beliefs, your biases, your assumptions at the door, open your mind to, let's say, new horizons, new possibilities, and allow yourself to stretch beyond what's probably become something of your mainstream thought process. So allow yourself to engage by thinking a bit broader, and at the same time, try and be as conscious as possible of your emotions and even the body language as you listen to see whether there's any new self-awareness triggered or awakened from this conversation. So hopefully I've got your attention. I'm guessing I've got Colleen. So first things first, allow me to welcome Colleen to the show, to the ET Project. Colleen, great pleasure to have you here. Looking forward to having a little fun with our conversation today.
Indeed. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And
Yeah.
I hope we haven't spared all our listeners. We're gonna more have fun than we are. You know, those of us who like to be challenged will be happy. Let's put it that way. So
Well, our listener base are predominantly leaders, so they're used to being challenged. So
great.
I'm sure they're open to it, and hopefully are tuned in right now. So maybe as a means of leading us off, Colleen, I know you enjoy shifting to a higher level of thought, and that you've been a student of Gita Bellin, and that you even with your coaching practice, you centered around ontology, essentially exploring ways of being. So we'll probably circle back to all of that shortly. But
Yeah, wow.
as
I can
as
imagine
an
your listeners are
opening,
going, what? What? Yeah.
well, I
Anyway,
did warn them in the beginning. So as an opening inquiry, I'm curious about your higher purpose. What is it that
oh.
you believe you're searching and striving for in the future that potentially your current activities are leading you towards?
Yeah, well, wow, what a question to start with. Um, okay, so you didn't ask this and we didn't prep this, just so your listeners know, but intuitively, if it's okay with you, I'm going to form a bridge. What the
Sure.
heck does higher purpose have to do with leadership, right? Like,
Mm,
what would be the point of such a question, probably?
yeah.
Um, and in the work that I do, and one thing to note is that I work really closely with with a strategic consulting firm. So I keep my skills really up to date. And so a lot of what's going to be talked about today, just so everybody here listening and knows, it's not so much out of left field as one might think, right? And so the purpose with leaders, what's the point? Well, that is exactly, at least in my definition of leadership, right? So there's so many definitions out there. People even can confuse the definition of leader with the definition of manager. Shall we even go there? But let's
Mm,
say if we're really going to talk about a leader, my favorite definition is one by one of the founders of my coaching school, which is a leader is someone declares possible what other people do not. And that's precisely what makes them a leader.
mm,
So if we're going to really be that person that has a vision, that sees the vision. Where is that vision coming from? Well, for most of us, that most creative vision comes from another part of our brain, not just our left brain, not just our rational, this is what, this is what makes sense. This is what's going to get me what I want. But it's going to be more the right brain as well, balancing, but bringing in much more of the right brain, which is much more around our true creativity, not necessarily getting out a paintbrush. I don't mean that, but like true creation. Isn't that what vision is? Vision is I see something you don't, we're creating something new. That makes sense. And so purpose is what has people drawn to us as leaders. That inner, so it's a difference between outside in, meaning, okay, I'm going to shape my behavior by what makes you like me, by what gets me more money, by what might get me promoted, by what get me the sales I need, right? That's outside in. And then there's inside out leadership, which is values, purpose. And which one is more powerful? Well, we can all take a couple of seconds and think about that. Who do we like to be around more? Right? We want to be around a genuine person, right? That really stands for his or her own vision, really. And so for me, thank you very much. My vision or my purpose, I'm stumbling a little bit on my word, not because I don't know it, but because I'm realizing I have two layers of it. Okay. So there's a layer with myself that I want to feel as serene as possible. And, I live in the same world we all do. I'm not in La La Land. I know how tough this world is. I was just talking with you earlier, Wade, about one of my frustrations, right? So it's not that I'm, but the more that I can make choices in alignment with myself, with a capital S, like my values, what I feel appeases my highest self, the more serene I am. That's that inside out, because I can't control most of what's going on out there, but
Absolutely.
I can control me most of the time. Sometimes I'm a little bit rebellious, and there's another question. And so that's layer one. And layer two is, how does that translate then? What is it that helps me feel more serene? It's when I am being my full self and helping, as one of my dear colleagues says, raise consciousness, right? Like help remind all humans I get the pleasure of working with who we really are. And most of us are limiting ourselves in one way or another, including this one, right? And so having that support, right? So that's what I would say is my purpose. And so it's helping leaders step into even a bit bigger version of themselves.
No, nice answer. Thank you for that. Has that always been the case? Like my own experience, just to give you time to think of that answer, but my own experience is that my purpose has evolved with my career and my circumstance. So I'm very clear on my purpose now, but maybe 10 years ago it was slightly different to what it is today. Is that your experience as well?
Well, that's a really great point, Wayne. My experience with myself is that purpose is already in me. It's not out there.
Okay.
And all of both my experiences and my interpretation of my experiences inform what my purpose is. So I can get more and more precise as I go on what it is. And now I'm really going to seem woo-woo, but here I'm going to promise any of you awesome listeners that have any kind of background in science, in particular physics, will relate to what I'm about to say. But there's actually a scientific fact around energy that when inside we feel light, expansive, as long as we're not getting into those unhealthy coping mechanisms, right? Like bugging out on sugar or whatever. But like, let's say more reasonable behavior, let's say not getting into those things, which I love to do that too. But we just naturally feel that expansive light energy. Science tells us that's actually the good energy. that's the energy to follow, to get more of. So when we're around people and we feel like that, we feel inspired, we feel like those are the people to go to more. Or we hear a subject and it piques our interest. And I had that happen for me when I first heard about coaching. I'd never heard of it before. And as soon as I heard of it, it's like my whole body lit up. And I knew that was going to have a hand in my purpose. I knew it. And there's other things, examples. And just to complete that thought, so we know when we go into something, a group of people, we go into a situation and we feel prickly energy, kind of like, I don't know another way to describe it, but that's actually energy we should avoid as soon as we can. Yeah. So for me, listening to that, if you will, how do I feel? What does it mean? Of course, using my left brain too. I'm not, and anybody who may have checked out my bio, I do have very strong background in business. I'm not just right. So, but combining the two, and there's actually a leadership embodiment expert named Richard Strozzi Heckler. He does say that. He says the best way to make decisions is using left brain, right brain, and the body, right, to check what's the best way forward. And that's how I've uncovered my purpose, right? And I would say there's still, I learn things all the time. So there's different ways I'm tweaking it, or as I see it being tweaked, is maybe a better way to say it as I go.
Yeah, look, you've worded it much more eloquently than I did, but I'm fully aligned with what you're talking about. So our listeners will have heard me introduce you at the beginning of this podcast, where I would have covered your career achievements and your background. But I'd like to sort of backtrack a little bit so that we can understand what led you on this journey in the first place, down this pathway.
Yeah. Well, the key event was what I just mentioned, and thanks for that. Meaning I had been in consulting just after my MBA, and the boutique firm I was working for, and everyone probably hears my accent or lack thereof, depending on perspective. It's always, but American, US American, as I say for my wonderful Canadian friends and Latin American friends. But I live in France. And so this boutique consulting firm was in Paris. And right after my MBA, and the owner of the consulting firm also had a coaching school. And I just remember my body lighting up, going, that's going to be me. I know that is what because I'm also have a very strong intuition. And by the way, and I know we talked about this when we first met, Wayne, so it seems important to say that I work with a lot of engineers. So I would not be surprised if listeners are going, intuition, I need to base it on fact. Yeah. Let me say this. Even engineers have found what I'm saying helpful as a compliment, not as a substitute, by the way, as a compliment to their choice making, right? That's the invitation, not get rid of, add to. But okay, so I could just feel that I'm very intuitive and I could feel it, but I wasn't ready yet. I personally, if we talk about stages of life, I was early 30s, had a boyfriend. I was just all about him and all about making money. And for me, it wasn't going to be change career now. Why backstep? I'm on this path, right? I don't want to, in my view at the time, backstep. But what happened is I went to the States, moved back, had an enormous reverse culture shock, enormous. I just wanted to move back to Europe. And I kind of started coaching myself because I said, well, you can move back, but only when you make a step change in your career, because I had been complaining, mumbling to myself. By this time, I wasn't still in the boutique consulting firm. I had moved on to an organization that no longer exists, but was specializing in purchasing solutions. It just was too, for me, and we're talking about purpose, what felt that expansive energy, I wasn't feeling it there. So I had done a lot of complaining to myself, and I said, okay, but we're not going to go back and get in the same situation. We're going to do something different. So then I started researching. I actually had an interview with a company I thought I wanted to work with, because by this time there I was in North Carolina, US. Now there is a lot to say about, it's a beautiful state, very warm, friendly people, not far from the beach, thank gosh, one of my favorite things about it almost. However, not very international. And I was really missing that international touch. And I could visualize it because I'd been in the heart of it when I lived here and then had moved back. And so I interviewed on the phone with this company and they said to me, well, you're not a fit at the end of it. They said at this time. Now this is huge for me because those who start reading things that I write, including an upcoming book that we might talk about later, and it's okay if we don't, but just to say, I talk a lot about being a people pleaser, a recovering people pleaser. And so the old me would have said, oh no, you don't want me. This me said, okay, so what would make me a good fit? And she said, okay, you need to do this and that, and you need to go to coaching school. It's great. I had already done research. Which one? And she said, well, most of our people do this particular school. I'll just say it, Newfield Network. And I'm not advertising for them, but let me say, I'd had a coach at the time that was asking me to go to a different school, but ended up going to Newfield because it brought in the body and the body intelligence. So just to say, there's a lot of very smart people that bring in the body. So even, and I had started coaching school as a way to basically, as I speak in metaphor a lot, have a feather in my hat so that I could go back into corporate life in HR, maybe org design, talent management, something like that. And that this coaching certificate would supposedly give me, the fluff, literally and figuratively, I might need. But midway through that training, I realized, forget the feather. This is the hat. Like, I love this. And I also realized, because my specialty in my MBA was entrepreneurship. And so it really, most coaches, most of us, not all, but many of us have our own businesses. So it was perfect, like in terms of a setup, logistics, plus, yeah, there we go. My heart energy, which, by the way, again, science, they're more, now I'm going to forget the word. Sorry. More neurons, I think. Neural pathways running from the heart. Huh?
Yeah. Yes.
From the heart to the brain, then the brain to the heart. So the heart's actually wiser, not to say we don't need the brain, but the heart picks it up first. But anyway, not to keep belaboring that, but the point is, it was lighting me up and I knew I needed to do it. And I had the joy of being laid off right around that time. Joy, because I really was happy about it. And actually, it was really interesting because I had this moment right in coach. I was in Colorado at the school, like class, right in the middle of class. And I get this call from the company that just laid me off. And I had just felt this body light up from realizing this is what I want to do. I want to start my own coaching company. And I get this call from the company and they're like, we want to take you back and we'll offer you your position back. And I knew I asked for a few hours to think about it. And I knew that, well, first of all, let's be real. I didn't trust them fully because they said, but we can't guarantee you that if you leave again, that you'll have all these benefits that we're offering you now, right? As part of the layoff. So I knew, the truth is I also didn't trust them. That's part of the equation. But mainly, I knew that if I went back and worked with them, I would never launch into my coaching business because I would find one reason after another, or excuse is a better way to say it, not to do it. So that's what I did it. And then, one of the things also I started seeing, I really believe this. I believe I'm a born coach, born facilitator. One of the main teachers at the school, and he's somebody I found really, really inspiring. His name is Julio Olaya. He's a Chilean man who's lived in the States a long time. But he says, and I quoted him in my book, we coach from our wounds. And, again, not belaboring this, but having done a lot of research on this topic, I literally have both volunteered to help, have worked directly with, been helped by, no small figure to say thousands of people, particularly women, but not only. I can say a lot of people in the world are affected by what I'm about to say, but just like a lot of dysfunction in our home childhood life that affects us today and affects how we think today and affects our choices today. And So because I had that, and I had also been working on myself, not only to be a coach, but for personal reasons, because I wanted to just feel better, right? Get to that place of serenity. And by the way, as within, so without, which we both know that, right? The better I feel inside, the better my life starts looking and feeling outside.
Yes.
I had that aspect that I felt Julio was talking about, plus as an American, a Kentuckian at that, who made a life in France, very interested with friends all over the world and all interested in all kinds of cultures and languages. And that's what he said, 3 things make up a great coach. He said it's, yes, a formal training just to get the structure. He said it's kind of like a devotion to our own growth, because we can't get what we don't have, and I wouldn't try, right? For me, if I don't know it, I say it. And the third is just a general true interest in people and all kinds of people, as exemplified through languages or movies or books, right? All different kinds of culture, but the way in which different kinds of people express themselves. So I felt like I was also getting these messages like, okay, Colleen, you're on the right track. And then things have just, follow the yellow brick road, basically. I mean, that's the one thing about our purpose, I believe, is once we say yes, okay, I will give into this expansive feeling because I have this nagging thing going on inside until I do. Once we give in, my experience, doors just start opening. Yeah. So that's what's happened. And that's how I find myself now back in France with a global coaching company, etc. And speaking to you today, of all joys. Yeah. That was a very long answer, I'm sure, but hopefully that was helpful to people.
Yeah, no, I think it sort of paints the picture that takes us in the direction that we need to go anyway. So I want to shift a little bit here and start bringing in some reference points, starting with, I'm sure many of the listeners have heard the abbreviation IQ, EQ, maybe CQ for curiosity, quotient, AQ, whether that's adversity or adaptability. Then there's also one which we call SQ. Now, SQ could mean social, but in our case, Colleen, we're going to talk about spiritual. So,
okay.
If that's
we're going to go there. Cool. I didn't know if you'd go there after we talked about it.
Well, we don't have to go too deep, but I think it's a nice fit to this conversation because for many companies it's almost a taboo topic, but there are some companies like I believe Nike, Ford, even Boeing, I believe, have embraced this spiritual quotient to some extent. Whether it's in their vocabulary that they use, whether it's in the way that they look for their talent to have a higher SQ than maybe other companies. But I think it's an interesting topic. And for many companies, it still conjures up this, I don't know if it's a negative, but it's almost like a spooky, I don't know how you would explain it, but it's not a positive thought process. And I'm a little bit interested why you might think there is this negativity around it. What is some of the beliefs that people hold when they hear us talk about this?
Well, that is such an awesome question. Rather than just launching into why SQ and all the benefits, like exactly why not SQ? Like what the heck, I think there's going to be, the answer will differ according to national culture, family culture. But here's some things that I've heard. For example, I live in a country where it's actually illegal to bring in anything, quote, religious. And a lot of people confuse spirituality with religion, if I may, with respect, which in my view, they can go together, but they don't have to. For some people, they do, but it's not a hard and fast rule that they do. In fact, I've often heard, and I believe this for me, right? Religion's for people afraid to go to hell, and spirituality is for people who've already been there. That's just resonates for me. So I think that's the first thing, is living in this country, right, where really it's like a taboo type of thing. It's considered, therefore it can be considered quite woo-woo, whether that's here or somewhere else. I actually grew up in the Catholic system. So I did 12 years, excuse me, of school from the age of 6 to 18 in Catholic school. But I don't consider myself practicing. There's a lot of things around Catholicism, even Christianity, I would say I don't necessarily agree with. Not really the teaching itself, but more around the structure. And the more that as I mentioned earlier, I work one-on-one with a lot of people, both me giving help, them helping me. And I hear a lot of religious abuse happening as well, where there are people that can be kind of battered with, told they're not good or not good enough and need to do what, this religious figure or that religious figure would think or do. And I mean, there actually happens more than we might think, that kind of pontification, right, can be used as a justification to shame people. I mean, I've heard, I didn't personally have that happen to me, but what I came to find for me was that and even now, I'll be really honest, as usual with me, I'm probably a little too honest sometimes, that it can be hard to go down this path where we're opening ourselves up to a different kind of thinking and a different kind of solutions, especially when in the past, those of us who may have been raised in a particular religion, maybe we're still told we should be in it, maybe our culture tells us we are, or maybe we just fully do believe it. I don't know if I'm going down a track that's helpful, but I'm just speaking intuitively. But what comes to mind for me is, as long as we're truly at choice of what's right for us, that it feels like it's the right thing, right? But at the moment where we feel like we have to, it's a duty, we'll be looked bad upon, that's where I believe we start mixing around what's our right path. At least that's my experience. But that's where I think when we start shooting on ourselves, or we've had stuff shooted on us, is where people back off from it, because they don't want to be told how to live, which of course, who does?
Yeah, for sure. So if we're looking to introduce more around this approach, I believe, I think you might have even mentioned to me when we spoke the first time, that instead of referring to it as spiritual, we now refer to it as a different, or under a different terminology, MQ. Now, MQ could also mean other things, right? It could also mean managerial, it could mean moral. What does MQ mean in your understanding?
Yeah, that is a way that we introduce the SQ to clients in a way that can be more digestible. But here we're talking meaning quotient. So it ties in with what you asked at the very beginning around purpose. So what gives us a sense of meaning? What draws us from the inside out? And it doesn't have to have any kind of, again, it doesn't mean it's the same thing as religion unless we want it to be. It can be just connecting with our values. It can be connecting with a cause, the environment, peace on earth, right? Everything, the world is so much need of attention to causes. It's like there's no limit to that. And so meaning quotient, yeah. And very often, by the way, just to tie in, as I both am in one-on-one coach, but also lead leadership workshops, at the very beginning part of the workshop is always goes more slowly than most people are comfortable. And there's a reason for that. And it's science again. Here we go. The reason is, when we're talking really fast and we're trying to get blah, 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 right? We're up here in the left brain, can be very helpful. There are moments we need that. No ditching. And if we want to add more solutions, the slowing down part allows us to connect more to the right brain. And I did touch my left, so there's my right. Allows us to connect more to the right brain. That's like, well, like facing you different, it's going to look different, but that's okay. Allows us to touch the right brain. But even more, and we do use this word. We use this word and think of Fortune 500 companies all over the world going from the head to the heart. Because when those two are aligned, but first we have to go with the heart, understand what it's saying, check it with the, and that we do that by slowing down. And by the way, we don't just stay there in kumbaya. Yes, kumbaya is there as a team together. And we mix it with the head and get to concrete, right, way forward, but not just a performance based, what's rationally makes sense, also what has meaning for us. And then how can we pull that out as well? So I don't know if that, again, I'm just kind of going in what feels like the right answer at the time, Wayne. I hope that's okay.
That's perfect. No, that's clear. And even for me listening to that, I can imagine a lot of leaders would feel more comfortable if you introduce it under the guise of meaning versus spirituality. So it makes a lot of sense. What I'd love to do, Colleen, if you don't mind, is bring in the teachings of Gita Bellin. And if you don't mind, introduce her and what is the work she's doing. But more so, how has her work influenced your own?
Oh my gosh. So, woo, talk about meaning. Gita has changed my life. And most people would describe me as spicy. So I'm a rebel with a really good cause. I have a tendency to be direct. I'm learning more and more to soften it. People who know me know I have an enormous heart. And Gita is all of those things. She's very direct and so much love for humanity. She's devoted her life to helping people. I mean, this is my word, but wake up to augment their level of consciousness. So Gita, just to give people an idea of this wonderful person, she grew up in the UK. There's a lot more to her history that I'm skipping over, but one of my favorite parts is with her then husband, they drove across Europe and Asia to Nepal, where she moved for multiple years to teach meditation. So she's a character, right? Now she lives in Australia, actually, in the bush. I don't know exactly where. I think an hour or two outside of Sydney. Okay. But what did I learn most from Gita? I learned so much, but here's the biggest piece. With this person, me, that I mentioned earlier about being a recovering people pleaser. And with that, if we go look at the levels of needs from Maslow, Abraham Maslow, what is it really? It's wondering, do I really belong? Right? Am I really likable? Every human I work with has this, every human. So is there a place at work to talk about this? Well, people might not be comfortable, but I can tell you it goes on anyway. So we might as well name it, right? And so what I picked up from Gita is that the true distinction between my essence and my behavior. Okay. In other words, essence is always good, no matter what. It's that our behavior, first in line again, which can be questionable, because that's a different thing, right? And that's what we can adjust. But it's not that we're bad because we did so and so. And then in alignment with essence, and this ties in with purpose. This is perfectly orchestrated. I don't know if you did this on purpose, Wayne, but this ties in because it's just very similar to, and I'm not sure if it was Marianne Williamson or Nelson Mandela. I hear two different versions, but where they talk about basically, who am I not to shine, right? There's this talk that, again, Nelson Mandela gave it, and then I think Marianne Williamson wrote it. I'm not sure. I will attribute it to both. Essentially, that my purpose, living it is my business. Living my purpose is my business. What other people think of me is not. Right. That's the way I can best say it. So that has shifted everything for this former, recovering people pleaser. Because when I am, for example, putting content out on LinkedIn, when I'm speaking here with you, when I'm in front of a room and there are very senior leaders in the room, I used to not be able to do that because always running in my mind was, what will they think? Let me adjust my behavior here, blah, 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 blah. And now I realize that my behavior is so much less dependent on what I'm worried they will think, and
Mhm.
so much more on what is the best way to convey this purpose, right? I'm more connected in with that and letting go. And even now, I will push back to very senior people, always with a great intention, by the way. I never would have pushed back before because,
Mm.
oh, look at me. Why would they listen? And now it's like, I don't mind what they think about me as a person. I'm standing for the principle. Do
Mm.
you see what I mean? And so that has shifted enormously. Um, there was this brand. I also did a yoga teacher training. I'm a big yogini that has helped me in business because I can just be so much more relaxed. And I mean, it's helped me in all ways in life. But at the studio where I used to teach, where I didn't teach, where I used to take classes, there's
Mm.
this brand called Spiritual Gangster. And there's that S word again, I know, but it reminds me a lot of what I think Gita has instilled in me, is more that idea of being like, I don't know, kind of being more fearless about my purpose, and yeah, being stronger in it.
Very nice. And if my research was correct, I don't know how old she must be now, but she's been practicing her beliefs and working in this field for more than 6 decades, I believe.
Oh,
So
she's
yeah,
85, I think. I'm pretty
she's
sure she's
85.
85 in November.
Uh,
Yeah.
she sounds like an incredible lady, and some of the material I wrote, companies even like McKinsey Company have brought her in and used her um, methodology, if that's the right
Yeah,
word.
we use
To,
yes.
yeah,
Yeah, she
yeah,
has trained some top facilitators in the world.
yeah.
Um, I mean, I studied with her. It's not for the faint of heart.
Mm.
I'm just saying it's not. But boy, did she whip this ego into shape. And yeah, she's amazing. And if you're interested, everyone, you can go to her website. It's just Gita Bellin, GITABELLIN.com. Now, the website looks a little bit, as my virtual assistant says, out there. So I would say, if you're continue to be open-minded, you will find some of the good stuff in there. And she has worked with many organizations, has been hired by national governments, by the way,
Mm.
to whip, to help raise their consciousness. Seriously, it's not an exaggeration. So to your point, there are organizations that are in, okay, this might seem, I don't mean this in an arrogant way, I'm not finding a better word, but there are organizations waking up and are realizing, okay, if we're really, I mean, look at this world. I stopped watching the news ages ago.
Mm.
Ages. I
Mm.
only, if I want to get depressed, then I watch them, basically. Okay. And it doesn't look like it's going to get any easier. Um, and so what's my point? My point is, well, Albert Einstein, right? If we keep doing what we've always done, we're going to get what we've always gotten. What's the definition of insanity? Doing
Mm.
the same thing over and over, expecting different results. So why not open up and complement our usual way of going just by another? It's like, if this were a prism, if our solution box were a prism, and we're used to going over, let's say, 1/3 or 1/2 of the different facets of the prism, why not open it up and have more facets to choose from?
Yeah. There's, in my mind at least, there's little to lose and so much to gain. So, I'm very open to it as well. I think that's a beautiful segue, however, to now move into looking at Authentic Leadership International. So, your organization. Um, Now, I know you have a branding, or at least I look at it as a branding, where you talk about bolder moves. So,
Yeah.
is that like your tag or your tagline or your branding to explain the organization's approach, or what's the connection?
It's a really good question. I'm still, even as you were saying that, I was thinking, wow, I still have more connecting to do. But basically, when I got to the title, I got to the title Authentic Leadership International because I asked my colleagues in coaching school primarily, how would you describe me? And everybody said, well, what you see is what you get, authenticity. And you're extremely global. I mean, I'm in a system where I went to school and the particularly consulting firm I work with, where there's a lot of international people. So I'm not the most international person, but let's say compared to average Jane, I'm quite international. And so that's where the name of my company came from. But what happened is, as I told you, I had been in the States when I moved back. And this is my experience. And I can probably share this with you because you're not American, because I have shared this before with US Americans and I can feel when I say this, but as an American, I can say this. I noticed because of the culture in many of the companies that a lot of people held themselves back from saying their truth. Right? Because there's such a fear about getting fired. And over there, if one can get fired like this, and there's no, I live in Europe. So then there's a care there around, like we wouldn't have that care here is what I mean, around medical care in particular, but not only, anyway, I don't want to go down and it's not judging. I noticed a big difference and quite surprised about how closed up I experienced a lot of people. And so I realized, wow, it really takes a lot of courage to be who one is and say it. And so actually, the truth is, I started Bolder Moves before it was cool to use the word bold. I started it in the winter of 14. So it's been 10 years. And I just started making these. I had this idea that every week I would send a bolder move of the week, to my mailing list. In fact, one just went out 40 minutes ago. It's like every Tuesday. And it's just 2 or 3 lines. And then with the website, because the website is not Authentic Leadership International, the website is boldermoves.com. So it can get confusing, and I honor that confusion. I get it. It just felt like it's more of what we do. It's what we want to help people, exactly what you said, ingrain that habit. Because if we take a very simple model of 3 concentric circles, where in the middle it's comfort zone, and then learning zone, and then freak out zone, right? The idea of a bolder move is stepping out of our comfort zone, but into learning, like you've challenged all the listeners today. But the thing is many of us very smart people, we tend to, we're high achievers. We can even say, hello, overachiever, right? I can say that about myself, and I work with a lot of overachievers. So what does that mean? For many of us, just stepping out of the comfort zone into learning is not enough. They want to go all the way into the freak out zone. Yeah. But when we do that, and we're working on changing our mindsets, because it's mindset and then behavior. If we just change our behavior, we're not sure that will last, that will be a transformation. We could easily go back to the old behavior if we're not also working on our mindset, right? And so what happens more of the time when we pressure ourselves to change too quickly is that we go into the freak out zone. And then we're freaking out when, all of us have very busy days, things come in we don't expect, it's life, right? And so on that day, if we're trying to have that new mindset, we likely won't, because we're pushing too hard. But when we stop and we just adjust it and do a little bit every day, out of comfort into learning, out of comfort into learning, out of comfort into learning, very gently, but consistently, gradually the comfort zone expands. And that for me is the bolder move, because there are things which, what's hard for me? Going to bed before midnight. Seriously. And I coach people all over the world about resilience, self-care, going to bed. I'm serious. Like that's challenging, but other people are like, what? I mean, I've worked with people in bed by 9 o'clock every night. I'm just saying we all have our thing. Yes. And so that idea of practicing what might be bold for me is not bold for you, but practicing in small, gentle ways, because that's the other thing. We can be so darn hard with ourselves. And when I heard to be gentle with myself, I threw it out the window at first. Like, what? That is not how I've gotten from here to there before. But I started realizing that my old way really doesn't work because I need to be with me 24/7. So when I can be kind and gentle, but still do it, it got done so much better. I felt better. It was actually better quality. I didn't burn bridges along the way, you know? And so that's where the boulder comes in, because it's more than just the action. It's my whole approach to my own transformation journey. Yeah, which starts with these tiny little steps.
Very nice, very nice. And thank you for that. I mean, it gives a lot more clarity around the whole premise that underlines it. So thank you. I'm conscious of the time, and there's a few more questions I'd like to get through though before we finish up. So if you don't mind. So I mentioned at the beginning that you're into anthological coaching as your methodology, if you like. And you mentioned in some of that bolder moves explanation, some of the like the Bell and the Orr models. And in your practice, it seems like you combine the two models into one, which looks really powerful. When I was looking at your website, I mean, there's a lot of extremely high level thought leaders that have been foundational to this. Gregory Bateson, Chris Argyris, Scone and Senger and co. So do you mind just introducing the premise of how you use they're both acronyms, by the way, Bell, body,
and or
language, and then Orr, which is the observer, action, result. Would you mind explaining just how you incorporate that into the practice?
Sure, thank you. So starting with the Orr model, and it's like you said, observer plus action equals results. It's very similar to what I said a few minutes ago, is that it's really the difference between change and transformation. So a little bit ago, before we met here online, I changed into this green shirt, for example. And later I'll probably change out of that green shirt. But in a couple days or tomorrow, I might put on this green shirt again. So I changed, but only temporarily, right? And so that's what happens when we focus first and only on behavior. It doesn't mean behavior isn't important, right? We're talking about a bolder move. So clearly the move is a behavior. So it doesn't mean it's not important, but when we focus on it first and only, the first thing to look at in that model, in the new field terminology, observer, is me, my mindset primarily. What are the glasses, metaphorical glasses, in which I'm observing the world or observing myself in the world? What is that? And how is that best serving me? And there goes that whole purpose thing, being in alignment with self again, right? And so in my coaching, whether it's coaching or workshops and work with people, it's very much, okay, is that really the view that illustrates your values best, right? Is that where you want to be priority? There's a whole list around meaning, and first getting our perspective. And again, I was on a call earlier today with my mentor. I mean, I still have some work to do in another area of my life, right? I mean, we're all on this journey, I think, for that in one way or another. But getting that more in alignment, and then the behavior we do either is going to shift or our intention behind the behavior shifts. And the intention is a very powerful tool as well, right? There's that energy behind it that's different than necessarily a goal. There's a difference. So so that's the Orr. So it's observer, then action equals results. And the idea is that if we just focus on the action, we'll likely get the same results. So we need the observer shift in the observer's perspective, mindset. And then what happens is we don't just change out of our shirt, we become more like the caterpillar that becomes the butterfly, right? And then who makes up the observer, by the way, when we talk mindset? Well, in this model, that is the Bell model, that makes up the observer. And so it's body, emotion, language. body emotion language. It could be everything from my body language to how I feel. I was talking earlier about the expansive energy or prickly energy, my breath, right? I definitely make different decisions when I'm stressed out and my breath is than when I'm centered and present.
Yes.
I just make different choices. Emotions, being aware. So that's another E word, by the way, that not always is. We know that EQ is this buzzword, but not everybody's comfortable talking about emotions at work, but they're there. So they drive a lot of our choices. So we might as well get comfortable knowing what they are. And yeah, finding healthier ways to express them. And then there's language, which can be body language, spoken language. I mean, they're like the Olympic rings where they have their own space and then their space they share with each other.
Right.
So becoming aware of those, I would add in, which not sure where they go, but since I've left coaching school and I now work, did the work with Gita, etc., I would definitely add in values to that and needs. Not sure where those go in there, but very, very important. Most of the time when we have limiting behavior, it's because we're trying to get our needs met in ways that just really aren't helpful to us.
Is there some form of closing of the loop? Like at the way it's drawn, it's more linear. I would imagine once we hit result, the result then feeds back into the bell.
Indeed.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a great question. So it depends if we're talking coaching or workshop, but let's just take an example of coaching for this. What's really important, and again, here's a metaphor, is to know where is this coaching ship going, right? We're out at sea and we don't want to be subject to the winds and tides. So where are we going? We need the destination. And with no hesitation, I can tell you 99% of the time, that destination ends up moving by the client. They move their own destination, i.e., they change their goal, they change the result they want based upon what they learn about themselves.
Yeah.
Really. So it's a loose structure that's based upon the experience, wishes, needs of the coachee, right? The person in question. And so the result, definitely, they might hit that result quickly and be like, hey, now I want to do this, or I saw this as a bigger need, or, okay, how can I translate this to my team? Or, right, how can we keep going? Because again, one of the things with leaders, what are we? We're people who see what's possible and we declare that and we work toward that. And so most of us don't just, I mean, there are a lot of organizations that call leaders just people occupying certain roles and are paid a certain salary. My vision, my view of leaders so much wider and bigger than that, right? It's more about the mindset. And so with that in mind, the mindset's part of who we are. We're not just going to stop when we get what's the next thing. Like, I already know what my second book will be, for example. You know what I mean? Like, what's the next and what's the next? And not always bigger necessarily. It doesn't necessarily mean it has to be even bigger and loud. It can be just the next right thing. What's the next right thing?
Right. You could identify a gap, for instance. You might find there's something else missing and just target that. We're really tight on time. I apologize, Colleen, but
that's me talking too much.
I would love to know the name or the title of your book and when it's going to be released.
Yeah, thank you. So the working title, talk about transformation and butterflies, is The Caterpillar's Journey. And it's 365 moves to bolder leadership. So it started as from the weekly Boulder Move, which, by the way, if you're interested, I always promise not to sell because I cannot stand when people bombard me with emails, excuse me, and are trying to sell to me. But if you're interested, if you go to bouldermoves.com, it's in the first fold. You just click on the yellow button and you can get a Boulder Move of the week. Again, 2 to 3 lines. I will not sell to you. But the book got started, I thought it would be low-hanging fruit. And so I started from the Boulder Moves of a decade ago. I thought I just put them all together and make a book, right? Easy peasy, but it didn't work like that because I noticed that I'm not quite the same person I was 10 years ago. And then I started seeing ways to make the book even more useful. So it has exercises in there for embodying the practices. And there's no expectation that one reads from cover to cover. and gets all of them down. I mean, that would be like, wow, I don't think I could do that. But there is a whole tome there, if you will, right? For anyone that wants to kind of shake up the way they do things or get inspired for different ways of thinking.
I'm trying to remember while you're talking, there's a book on Stoicism by one of the American modern day thinkers, philosophers, and he released a book with 365 days worth of insights, Stoic insights. You just prompted me to recall that. I actually read it. I went
Oh,
through
cool. All right. Well, hey, Wayne, you'll be my guest if you want to.
Absolutely. I look forward to it. Do you have a release date at this stage?
Well, it will be probably early summer. Yeah.
Okay.
Early
Right.
summer.
And you've mentioned your website, so boldermoves.com. What about anywhere else for people to connect with you?
So first of all, Boulder, some people for some reason think it's the city in Colorado. It is not. It's BOLDERMOVES.com. My email, which is Colleen@bouldermoves.com. And then I would love to connect with you on LinkedIn. So find me on LinkedIn, Colleen Slaughter.
We will put those links in the show notes, of course. Colleen, unfortunately, I know we could talk for a lot longer, but unfortunately we're out of time. Love the conversation. Hope we've still got some listeners tuned in and they took the challenge on board and opened their minds. I'm sure they did. I'm also equally sure you won't be disappointed if you did. I think it was a fascinating conversation. So thank you for being on the show and wonderful sharing of insights.
Thank you, Wayne. I had fun as well. Really enjoyed it.
So what are you waiting for? Hit the subscribe button below and click on the bell icon so I can pop up in your feed occasionally with a great tip for your ultimate growth.